Right, hello everyone, welcome to Sinking Simulator, and we're here for something a bit different. So April is the month in which 108 years ago the Titanic sank, and it was a few days, just shy of a week ago now, 108 years ago, that the Titanic did sink, and a few of you who've been in the channel for a long time might know that I have a kind of special place in my heart for Titanic history. Even when I was younger, I used to be quite fascinated with the events that happened. My mum always likes to bring up the fact that I once made a perfect A3 drawing of the Titanic from memory, and everything was perfect. Every window, every door, all the decks, it was all perfect. Anyway, I don't like bringing. My mum likes to embarrass me, so here it is. So, again, people who have been with this channel for a long time will know that I did a series called Nostalgia Trip, where I went back and played games I used to play many, many years ago when I was younger, and one of them was Titanic: An Adventure Out of Time. And when that series ended, I did want to do a bit of a kind of essay on this, a video essay of the sinking of the Titanic, but I just didn't have the tools to be able to do it. But now I do have the tools to be able to do it. So not in real time, don't worry, it's not going to be that long, but just do a bit of a recreation of the sinking of the Titanic and explaining a little bit about what happened in each of the compartments, because actually this simulator here is actually quite realistic, relatively realistic. It's better than the other ones I've seen, and it kind of shows the main phases of the sinking actually quite well. So yeah, so we can talk about it. So basically the way that we've set up the water is all nice and calm. As it was, there was very little waves on the night that the Titanic sank. I know it was nighttime when the Titanic sank, but we're just going to keep it at daytime so that you can see things. And so yeah, this is the Titanic. You can see it's 4 funnels. One fun fact about the Titanic is only 3 of them were functional, and one of them, it could be used to vent steam, but it wasn't connected to the boiler room. So like if you go into the interior view here, so what you've got here is the boiler room. So you've got boiler room 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and this little hood here and here goes up into here and connects to funnel 1. This one and this one go up into here and connect to funnel 2, and then this one and this one go up here and connect into funnel 3. But actually there's nothing that uses funnel 4. You can still vent steam through it and things, but yeah, it was mostly just for show, because the competitors, things like the Lusitania and things, they all had 4 funnels, and people wanted the kind of illusion that it was you know, of that caliber. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the default view, and this is a compartment view of the Titanic, and we're going to set up the sinking realistically. So without further ado, we're just going to get this underway. Now the simulation time is off, so nothing's going to happen until we put it back on. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take our time, and I'm going to realistically, on this screen, I have the actual damage schematics for the Titanic, for the injuries it sustained. Injuries, is that the right word? The damage it sustained. So when the Titanic hit the iceberg, a total of 6 compartments were flooded, and the Titanic could only stay afloat with 4 compartments flooded. So we'll talk about that, and we'll explore the damage. So this is the forecastle here, and in the forecastle compartment there was light damage roughly here. It was a bit more horizontally extended than that, but it was you know, it wasn't much damage, so we're going to leave it at this. Just on the other side of the bulkhead, slightly higher up, right in between the divider for these two compartments, there is... let me just see what I'm doing. Yeah, okay. So there was one horizontal line going across here, and another horizontal line in the same compartment, slightly higher than the compartment line, but roughly on this, because you can see how it comes down, roughly on the same level but above. So kind of above and below these compartments were not there. So basically, the way this works is that this shows like the grey shows the structure that will slow water down but isn't watertight, and the black is a watertight bulkhead. So we'll bear that one in mind. So then we are going to drop down to here, and the third bit of damage comes in horizontally and right into here. So basically, this is the forecastle. This is cargo hold 1, which was punctured here, here, and here. Cargo hold 2 was punctured here, and then there was a long one right on this waterline here. So starting from roughly here and most of the way back, let's just fill that in properly, to about halfway back into the compartment. So there was this was one of the main bits of damage here, and then the other one is in boiler room 6 and boiler room 5. So roughly here, and this stretches most of the way through the compartment. So this was the other really large bit of damage. It doesn't matter that it's not going in a straight line, and it just cuts into boiler room 5. So this is the damage the Titanic sustained in the iceberg collision. A tiny puncture in the forecastle, more significant puncturing in the first cargo hold, second, and quite extensive damage to the third cargo hold, extreme damage to boiler room 6, and light damage to boiler room 5, 6 compartments in total. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the interior view. No, we'll keep it in the exterior view for now. And then we're now just going to turn the physics on. So we'll do this. Okay. So we'll hide the toolbox because we don't need that anymore. And you can see already, so this isn't in real time, this is happening quite quickly, but you can see the rapid flooding of the forward decks when the Titanic basically took on its damage. And that's pretty accurate, so maybe not quite as fast as it just went pfft, but in the first 20 minutes, is it? There was a very significant increase in the heel of the ship going forward. It went into the water, and then it kind of sort of stabilized for a while. And the reason for that, if we go back into the default view, we see the compartments. So cargo hold 1 is flooded right the way up to the nearly the top of the bulkhead, but not going over this section here. So the upper half of the forecastle section is actually still dry, which is pretty not bad. Again, so that's cargo hold 1. Cargo hold 2 is flooded to here, and it's not spilling over. Cargo hold 3 is not spilling over. Cargo hold boiler room 6 is completely flooded, but it's not spilling over into 5. However, the light damage in cargo hold in boiler room 5 is causing the water level to rise slowly. So the ship is sinking, but it kind of, from an external point of view, it's stabilized. You know, it's not sinking very quickly at all. It's only really when you go into it that you can see the sections that they're going down. So it is definitely still sinking. It's just not sinking very quickly. So what happens at this point is everybody has been aware that the Titanic's hit something. The captain in his quarters has gone, I can't remember if I go to the interior view. So the designer of the Titanic, Thomas Andrews, his quarters was on the A deck off of the grand staircase. I think it must be one of, like, somewhere over here. That's a gymnasium. He got woken up, and Captain Smith got woken up by the feeling of the collision, and they've gone below decks to assess the damage. Andrews has realised that with 6 compartments flooded, there is only a matter of time until the Titanic sinks, and as a result, he puts a maximum time limit on it of about 2 hours. I think the Titanic sank in about 2 hours and 20 minutes, so yeah, that's not great. So there's a little bit of comfort because people have, you know, the ship, the rate of sinking has slowed quite a lot. So what's happening is, you know, all of the flooding that's happening in compartments 2, 3, 4, and 5, they're already as full of water as they're going to be for the moment. It's compartment room 6 that is actively flooding, and then it kind of gets to a point where it's just kind of gonna stop for a little while. So that brings some comfort to the passengers of the Titanic. I'm just seeing an interior view if there's anything of interest. Oh yeah, there is. So this is the squash court, I believe. And then where's this? Yeah, so that's a squash court here. This is a swimming pool. This was one of the places that Thomas Andrews came to actually see the extent of the flooding, was the Titanic swimming pool. What have we got if we go back here, just looking at the interior of the ship? So that's the first class smoking lounge up here. That's the D-deck main dining room. The gymnasium's up there. You've got rooms and things. That's a third class eating place. Is there anything else of note? Second class smoking lounge and dinner facilities. Yeah, that's kind of it. So, yeah, so there is a bit of a time to kill. And the one thing, I don't know exactly at what point relative to the sinking that the lifeboat started getting lowered, but at some point, obviously with Thomas Andrews realising that the Titanic is doomed, there is no alternative here. Even though it looks like the sinking has stopped, the ship is still in fact sinking. If I come over here, you know, and zoom right in, you can see in the pixels the ship is still going down. The captain calls the evacuation of the Titanic. Now, I'm going to set this up now, but at some point or other, so you can see here, the lifeboats are divided into 2 sections. The forward lifeboats and the rear lifeboats. There's kind of nothing in the middle. And at some point or other, the doors on D-deck were opened. And the reason that they were, is it D-deck or C-deck? I can't remember. But these doors were open. So when on port, this was the main doors with which passengers embarked and disembarked the Titanic. And the idea was that as the waterline came close to those doors, the boats would be lowered, and then passengers could step out of the doors and board lifeboats without getting all the way up to the boat deck, which was starting to get increasingly crowded. However, as the flooding worsened in the Titanic, those doors were actually never closed, and resulted in was part of the reason of a significant increase in the rate of flooding to the Titanic, which we will see. So we've now opened those doors ahead of time until they go underwater. It doesn't matter when I open them. But if we go into the interior view now, we can see, I guess it's a bit hard to see, but you can see that the swimming pool is not blue. So the flooding here has dramatically slowed for now, but what you can see here is that the F deck is now beneath the waterline, and the bulkhead stops at the top of the F deck. So very shortly, water is going to start spilling over from Boiler Room 6 into the upper. In fact, you can see it now. There's now water coming into the swimming pool. And then this is the start of things going wrong. Similarly, the forecastle, which had been dry, you can see it's not in blue. It's in the blue of the ocean, but not in the... I wonder, can I graphics? The water color. I don't know if I can make... Yeah, okay, so I can change the transparency a bit, yeah. So, yeah, actually this is quite helpful, to be honest. So, let's close over this. So yeah, this is quite helpful in that you can see the level of the water, and you can see that with the water now coming over the top of this bulkhead, the forecastle is sinking, and with the water coming over this bulkhead, the swimming pool is now starting to fill with water. So while the rate of sinking had decreased, it's now starting to increase again, because you've now got two compartments that are rapidly taking on water. The lifeboats continue to kind of start doing their thing, and you can see now that the Titanic's propeller is now starting to come up out the water. If I go to the exterior views, yeah, you're now starting to see the blades of the propellers well above the waterline. And so this is basically how it's looking. I don't know why Titanic's mirrored like that, it's a bit strange. Anyway, yeah, you can see the forecastle is continuing to increase with water, and the swimming pool is continuing to fill. So the rate of flooding has increased, but actually it's still not that fast. I mean, if we come away from the Titanic, you can see it doesn't look like it's going down very fast. So actually, at the moment, things are looking okay. And then eventually, there does come a point where, you know, it will start to plunge, and things will start happening very, very quickly. And we're kind of almost getting to this point here. So you can see this is the very tip of the bulkhead dividing Boiler Room 5 and Boiler Room 4. And it is almost full of water. So you've got water kind of poking around the E deck. A, B, C, D, E. Oh no, F deck. Is it F deck? I don't know if that's right. Anyway, whatever. Yeah. So you've now got water starting to come into passenger accommodations. The staff accommodations is well flooded by this point. And the forecastle is now almost completely full of water. That's the anchor housing there. And if we put it to external view, you can see the waterline. So the forecastle is slightly raised up compared to this section here, which is the cargo hold hatches. And the water level is very almost reaching that point. But more importantly, back here, the compartment into Boiler Room 4 has now started to flood. And so the rate of sinking is now increasing quite significantly. With the forecastle underwater, it's now fully flooded, as you can see. They are... there's a lot of weight going forward, and it's dragging the bow of the ship down. What else have we got here? So we're now getting perilously close to this waterline getting underneath, which is going to dramatically increase the rate of sinking as it did in the real Titanic. So yeah, we're now at the point where just about... Yeah, there we go. So water is now spilling into this, it's spilling over the lip of the Titanic, and the bow is now, look at that, the actual deck plates where Jack and Rose stood at the front with their arms out doing the thing. That's now underwater, and with the actual boiler room itself in D-Deck flooding, the water is now pouring in through those still open doors on the D-Deck, and the Titanic has now... It's now starting its final plunge to the bottom of the sea. So you can see now visibly the rate of sinking is dramatically increasing. And so what's happening here is with those doors open and the continued flooding from the damage, water is pouring into compartment 4, and it now, you know, can't be stopped. So things are now happen after, what, like an hour and a half of sitting relatively stationary, you know, not going down very quickly. It's now plunging down. Let's go to the interior view here. Yes, so you're now having the spillover effect, and what this is because the bulkheads don't go all the way up to the top of the superstructure. When the water fully floods a deck, it just spills over into the next one. And so, you know, all the way up to the A deck, the bridge is now completely underwater. And if we go into the exterior view here, so this is the water line. If we bring that back up, so yeah, you can see actually when you put the opacity up to full that, you know, a lot of the Titanic is now underwater, and there is the propellers are well up. But now you get to the interesting part, which is, you know, actually people didn't know about this until James Cameron rediscovered the wreck of the Titanic in 1983, and what he discovered is the Titanic actually broke apart during the sinking, which genuinely until that point it was not known. That they all thought it sank in one piece. There were isolated isolated accounts that the ship did break in two, but it didn't. It wasn't kind of well recognized. And part of the reason that it wasn't well recognized is that people think the Titanic was high up, and then it kind of, like, it broke apart quite high up and fell down, but it actually broke apart in the middle. And if we go back to the exterior view, and yeah, we'll maybe put the opacity to half here. So you can see that the middle part, where it breaks apart just after this kind of little tower here, is mostly underwater. So where it broke apart, most people hadn't seen it. So rather than breaking apart and falling down, for the most part it broke apart and actually kind of rose back up, which is why it was so well believed that the Titanic sank in one piece, because people just hadn't seen it. But we are now getting close to that point. So what's happening here is you've now got the opposing forces. You've got the extremely heavy front part of the ship, which is full of water and trying to drag itself down. And then at the back, you've got the compartments that are very lightweight and still buoyant, that the force of the water and the buoyancy is pushing it up. But then gravity is also trying to bring this raised section back down. So right here at this fulcrum point, you have a huge amount of opposing forces. And, you know, eventually, even the strongest material has to give, and it is only a matter of time until it does give. For the record, by the way, you saw me playing about the settings at the start. If you are trying this on your own, the default setting of 50 actually causes the ship to break apart further back, but the setting of 60 causes the break in roughly the right place. And here you go, the Titanic's now cut in half, and you see the funnels have fallen off. These funnels had previously kind of broken off under their own gravity, but it doesn't work so well in this. Now, one thing you do have to do here, let's just do 50.0. No. Why is everything red? Okay, so basically, what's happened is the keel plating here actually rips rips off more than it does normally. So yeah, so the Titanic was held together by the keel of the ship initially, and then it too ripped off, allowing the bow to start its free descent to the bottom of the sea. The hydrodynamics of the bow, so the bow is designed to cut through the water, and as a result of that, it's not shown well in this because it doesn't have forward hydrodynamics, but it actually causes the ship to start moving forward, and the ship is moving forward at roughly 30 miles an hour when it strikes into the bottom of the sea. Meanwhile, back up here, the damage to the rear of the Titanic is just far too extreme for the ship to remain afloat. So you can see it is just rapidly, after having come back to the surface for a while, it kind of leveled out and sat on the surface, but it's now rapidly filling with water. There is nothing to stop it, and eventually it's going to start losing its buoyancy. And in not all that long, you will see this, yeah, you can see it now starting to tip. And so it's starting to do the kind of characteristic thing where, you know, it goes right on its end before plunging down. I don't think this will show the gravity of this quite well. Yeah, so again, because this side is actually quite drag heavy and this side is very hydrodynamic, it sank bow first, not middle first. So it probably won't show this so well when it hits the ground, but yeah, it hit the ground with such forward force that the back decks, I'm trying to point with my fingers, forgetting you can't see them, I need to point with the mouse. The back decks here actually kind of sandwich on top of each other a bit as a result of the collision with the ground. So yeah, that side is going quite quickly. You can see the remains of the funnels there. The funnels tend to do funny things. But yeah, so you can see it's now in its characteristic death plunge as you see in the films. And one thing that's not shown, because this is in 2D, but actually at this point in the real Titanic, it actually started to corkscrew. So the Titanic was listing right up until it sank, and then it kind of went back, and it was fine, and then as it started going under, it just did a kind of corkscrew motion, twisting down before disappearing underwater. If you want a great animation of the Titanic sinking, Titanic Honor and Glory, part of their game is they've got a realistic render of the sinking of the Titanic based on a phenomenal amount of information, and it is just simply amazing. So now as the Titanic's starting to really do its final death plunge, you can see you've got this situation where the Titanic is sinking faster than these compartments can fill with water. I'm just going to fix one thing, because there's accidentally an airtight component in this part of the Titanic, so we're just going to flood that. And so what happens, you can see that there's parts of the ship that are going quite deeply underwater without any flooding, and so the forces of the air start kind of compressing them, and eventually they explode. And the survivors on the surface did hear several large explosions, which were compartments imploding and damage to the ship as it went underwater. And so at, oh god, what was it, 2:14 a.m. in the morning, just like in real life, the Titanic disappeared completely out of view at the night. Underwater there was obviously still some stuff happening, so yeah, that didn't happen. But yeah, so the Titanic, the bow section, skidded into the surface of the sea about 600 meters away from the back end of the ship. And again, it doesn't show it because the drag of the water isn't done well. But the ship actually continued its corkscrew. So the back end of the ship is, I think it leveled out. I think it either leveled out or it came up a bit, and it was kind of going down and corkscrewing about as it sank, and then eventually it to hit the water. And then, you know, yeah, the last parts of the Titanic are now just flooding with water. And so yeah, that was the sinking of the Titanic, and like it's quite impressive the way that the simulations handled it. It broke apart, maybe not in the right way, but in the right place. It broke apart, and the major phases of the Titanic sinking are replicatable in this. And you know, I've kind of ran you through the main points of it. So that was what happened to the Titanic. It hit the iceberg and initially had quite a big dip down, as we saw. And then it kind of was still sinking. It was fatally crippled, but it kind of stabilized for a good, you know, 80-90 minutes before that compartment in between boiler room 5 and 4 then started to flood. And when it started to flood, the doors into the D deck became another source of water on top of the damage to the Titanic for the ship to start flooding even faster. And at that point, as you saw, things started happening quite rapidly. The bow went underwater quickly. The weight of the bow became so much that on the middle of the ship, it was just too much to bear. It split in half. They remained connected for a while by the keel plates, which I manually removed so it was realistic. And then at that point, the bow plunged underwater, and the rear of the aft of the ship reared up, much as it did in real life, and then went underwater for the last time. So yeah, if you ever wanted to know a wee bit more about how the Titanic sank, that's the kind of rough phases of it. Obviously, there's plenty more information online. It's quite harrowing. And they tend to replay it every year, but Titanic Honor and Glory, they've got a real-time sinking of the Titanic, and it's combined with accounts of the survivors, as well as information of what was happening and when, you know, what was happening with the lifeboats, who was seen where, the distress messages that were sent out. It's all done very realistically and accurately, and it takes you through the 2 hours and 20 odd minutes from the Titanic hitting the iceberg to the actual point where it goes underwater, as we've shown. Obviously, it's much more accurate than what I can do, but I thought it was an interesting thing to do. One thing, again, the simulator doesn't show is the forward motion of the Titanic. That helped contribute to its sinking. So when it stabled out, as we showed you there, they tried to restart the engines and bring the ship forward, and in doing that, what they did was, I mean, the hydrodynamics change. Like, if water is just flowing into the ship, then that's bad. But if you're going forward, then the water is kind of roughly stationary compared to your ship. So by you going forward, you're kind of pushing the water into your ship, not just letting it flood. So there was also that element of the sinking as well, which just can't be replicated in this simulator because there is no ship forward motion. But yeah, and kind of there, the Titanic would lie undisturbed at the bottom of the seabed until 1983, when it was discovered by James Cameron. The rudder didn't break off and go back up to the surface, but, you know, this sandbox can't do everything. But, I mean, it's been good. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this bit of a... I know I mostly do gaming stuff, but, like, yeah, I do know shit. So, you know, bit of an informational kind of video on, obviously everyone knows that the Titanic did sink, but a wee bit more information on how it did sink, and yeah, hopefully you did enjoy. I know they've not published a demo in a good long time, but I'm still very excited about Titanic Honor and Glory and cannot wait for it to come out. If you do want more information on that project, I'll leave a link to it in the description, but for just now, I'll say thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!